Well, welcome back, folks. It's week 2 of the high school football season. We'll do a little recap of some of our thoughts on week 1, but first, there's kind of a bit of a not breaking news situation. It's a little bit. It's a few hours old, but Franklin's game this weekend against Hearn is canceled because of some positive COVID tests for the Lions. As far as I know, they hope to play a week 3 game next week, and I think their varsity activities are canceled through Tuesday. But I know Abigail knows a little bit more about it than me, so I'll kind of shoot it to her here real quick.
Yeah, they just announced this morning that, a few players tested positive for COVID, so that they were going to cancel the game on Friday, JV, varsity, all the games. And then, like Jeff said, boys athletics were all canceled until next Tuesday, September 8th, I believe. And that's all we really know at this point. I know that they're not going to reschedule with Hearn later in the year. So they're not planning on doing that at all. Hearn right now is going to take this off. Ricky Sargent talked to me. He said that they tried to reschedule with another team maybe, but it ended up just not working out. And they wanted to just take this week off and kind of reset, and didn't want to risk anything. And they will play next week.
So that'll be something to keep an eye on here over the weekend and the beginning of next week to see if that Franklin plan changes at all. Obviously it's a bit of a quick turnaround to play on in week 3, but with various distancing and quarantining and maybe bringing up some JV guys, I don't know exactly what they plan to do, but again, a situation to monitor. But before we continue on with week 2 here on the Eagles High School Sports Podcast, kind of buried the lead there. I'm Jeff Perkins with Alex Miller and Abigail Ochoa from the Eagle. Lots of stuff to take away from last week. I think you don't want to build your season on week 1, but some surprises, some upsets, some interesting debuts. So what were some of the stuff that you took away from week 1?
It didn't feel like a week 1. It felt like we were already way into the season. All these things happening, of course, in 2020 fashion. It was really crazy, but I was at Norman G. Bremond. We knew it was going to be like, two crazy offenses kind of going at each other, and it ended up being the complete opposite. Their defenses took over. Were big for them. That's how Norman G won with their 2 big stops at the end there. Bremond, you see a little bit of trouble, just trying to get back into the groove. Like we said last week, it was going to be kind of them teaching the younger players and things like that. So that was interesting for me to just witness and kind of see the how Norman G is this season, where they are with their players. Mason Hardy seems like the guy that might be a Yellett type for them, Luke Yellett, that they lost last year. Someone to definitely watch out for. He had 243 yards, and he also kicks for them as well. So that was interesting to see. But what do y'all think?
Well,
yeah, how about Norman?
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, jump in.
Oh, I was going to say, how about Norman G going over to Bremond and getting a big win out the gates? Yeah. I mean, that's a big win for Norman G.
Yeah.
I was out at Franklin. Honestly, it was a highly entertaining game. Franklin was just about out of it. They were down 2 scores in the 4th quarter. Lorena ran a fake punt with 5 minutes left, and it looked like, all right, Lorena's going to run out the clock. And sure enough, the next play, Lorena's quarterback fumbles. The very next play, Franklin scores a touchdown. They get a 3 and out. Franklin scores another touchdown with 40 seconds left, but they were unable to get the 2-point conversion. Coach Fannin told me he would have gone for it 10 out of 10 times, but highly entertaining game. And, Franklin's an interesting team because they were rotating quarterbacks. They were rotating between Marcus Raid and Bryson Washington. And it's a bummer that Franklin's game this week got canceled because Hearn was going to be a good challenge for them, and it was going to give them a good chance to see, okay, can we get this quarterback situation maybe a little straightened out, or where are we going to go with the offense? And for Hearn, it stinks because Hearn was going to have a good chance to pull off an upset against their Robertson County rival, I think. So it's a bummer that game got canceled, in my opinion, but a very competitive week one all around, and especially in Franklin. It was a very entertaining game that came down to the very end.
Yeah, I got a couple questions about quarterbacks. Well, since we just came from you, Alex, start with you. I know Wade is the returner at quarterback for them. I think he played just about all the snaps last year, if I'm not mistaken. What did you see from those two guys in Franklin?
Yeah, so Washington got the start, and throughout the first half, it was every single series. It was Washington, Wade, Washington, Wade, Washington, Wade. And then in the second half, it started out the same way. But it was interesting at the very end, Wade and Washington, they would interchange in plays, like different plays, it seemed like. And I thought Washington was a little better of a runner. Both of them threw the ball all right. But, you know, I think the competition's still open. And so that's why I think it's tough for Franklin to not be able to play this game this week, is that they don't have another chance to see who should be the QB. Or, hey, maybe two quarterback system going to work, and we're just going to make our opponents have to game plan for two guys. So, I'd say it's definitely still out there of who can take over.
And then Abigail, I was going to ask about Mason Hardy. You know, probably one of the most experienced quarterbacks that we have, but, you know, didn't hear too much about him last year or the year before, you know, simply because Yellett was there and he was kind of the star there. And, you know, Norman G was successful in Sitton's first year last year, but, you know, didn't really, you know, turn too many heads as far as, you know, making a deep playoff run or anything like that. So, you know, do you think that this is kind of a springboard type game that, you know, obviously it was a statement game, but do you think that Hardy can kind of use that as a springboard to, you know, stake his claim as one of the top quarterbacks in the area?
Yeah, he really came out in week one and said, "Hey, I'm here, guys." No doubt, like you said, Luke Yellett was obviously in that spot before he kind of took all the accolades in that. But Hardy looked really good out there on Friday night. He was really good. I mean, he rushed for them as well. He was pretty much running the whole time, and when he did throw, they did get two big touchdowns from it. So you really got to see him do both on Friday. You know, he went 13 for 23, 243 yards, and then he also kicked for them, like I mentioned. So he really was doing it all. He looked really good out there, and I think between him and Kotowski, you know, he was just able to kind of move around a bit more, get further than Kotowski was, and that really came down to who won at the end, who was able to rush more and better.
And I think as far as intensity at the end of the game and kind of intrigue, I think y'all's game's kind of far outpaced mine. My game was over by halftime. I was Navasota and Wharton. Well, it was over by halftime, but halftime was also at like 10 o'clock at night. But with that lightning delay. But Navasota looked really good against Wharton first time out. Went up 35-0 early in the third quarter and kind of coasted the rest of the way. If you look at the stats, you know, Jamar Jesse, starting quarterback, junior, first time varsity starter at quarterback, they look decent, but they don't kind of jump off the page at you. But if you watch that game, those are all pretty much accumulated in the first half. He didn't have to do much in the second half because Darius Randall broke off a 60-yard touchdown run, and then their defense got a stop and fumble return for a touchdown after that. So really, Jamar Jesse's day was pretty much done from that point. But he looked really good in the first half, made some good scramble plays, ended one of those by trucking over a defender to get into the end zone, made some good passes, and then just one mistake there at the end of the first half, trying to – I think it was third and goal maybe. They were right at the goal line, threw an interception 30 seconds before the half, but otherwise looked really poised, made some good decisions, made some plays with his feet. So I think Navasota took a really good step forward in replacing Zach Dyer, who has been there the last couple of years. So, you know, I think the real test comes this week at Sealy. I think they're a 7-point underdog at Sealy. Sealy's always usually fields a pretty good team usually contends for district titles. So I think this first, kind of difficult game for the Rattlers and a long line of them for the rest of the season will tell us a little bit more about where they are.
Yeah. Do you think they're going to stay with Jesse? I know there was some concern over him and another quarterback kind of fighting for that spot.
Yeah. So if I'm just basing it off of week 1, I would say Jesse's probably their guy because Drew Gonzalez didn't really come in until late in the fourth quarter, the last couple drives. But I mean, I think it's a situation where they're comfortable with either. So if something happens, they have confidence in Drew Gonzalez to lead them. So, but if I'm basing it off of week 1, and unless they throw a bit of a curveball at us in week 2, I'd say that Jesse's probably the starter there. Although again, that's not anything confirmed, just based off of watching the game and kind of seeing how they do that. So I would be surprised if Jesse wasn't the starter. And the defense also obviously looked really good. They held I think the final score was 35-13, and the last 6 points came on the final play of the game with 4 seconds left on a 40-yard heave. So by that point the game it was completely over. Defense scored a touchdown as well. So I think after the game, Coach Dacus was mainly just really happy with how his defense played, but the one thing that he wants to see them do is, finish the game, not give up that 40-yard touchdown with 4 seconds left. So, but I'd say, yeah, good returns for Navasota, and I think we'll learn a little bit more about them in week 2. But I think the biggest news coming out of week 1 came out of that Rockdale game. Rockdale looked really good in a 40-14 win over LaGrange, but got some pretty bad news as starting quarterback Jace Robinson went down with an ankle injury right before halftime, I think. And now they turn to Kobe Mitchell, who's been their backup for a few years now. And they're pleased with how he played in the second half of that game. And they've got plenty of playmakers to kind of, I don't want to say get by, because, they're, like I said, they have confidence in Kobe Mitchell, and we'll see going forward, how that works out. But throws a little bit more intrigue into that district race, I think.
Yeah, like you said, Robinson, he ended up breaking his leg at the end of the first half. And they're not sure if he's going to be back this season or not. But Mitchell did come in and really take over. I mean, they didn't really skip a beat with him. I think he had 67 yards rushing, and him and Valdez, they combined for 3 touchdowns in the second half. I think they'll be fine for now, like you said. But it'll be pretty interesting to see how they kind of keep going with Mitchell in the future.
Yeah, for sure.
The good news for Rockdale too is that when with Mitchell getting his first start of the season this week against Taylor's not a very good team. They've lost 13 straight games. I think Rockdale is favored by 3 scores. So got to think that Rockdale is probably going to be able to pull that one out, and it'll be a good game for Mitchell to get comfortable in that offense and take a little ownership of the team here these next few weeks.
Yeah, and we've mentioned the playmakers before. Cameron Valdez, Keyshawn Raven, both look like Division I prospects. I know they both have Power 5 offers, so a lot of firepower on that offense. And I don't think so. I talked to head coach Jacob Campsey earlier today, and he wouldn't say when exactly they were expecting Jacob Robinson to be back. He did say that they were kind of taking it day by day, and they were hoping that he could get back, but he wasn't going to commit to saying anything. If you ask Jacob Robinson, he's going to be back by the playoffs based off of his Twitter account. So take that for what it's worth. But I think the hope within that program, I think the hope is that they can get him back for the playoffs. But I think right now you've got to just assume that it's Kobe Mitchell's show. And that really makes those championship aspirations interesting because, again, we don't really know what Kobe Mitchell, the quarterback, is like. We know he's got a lot of athleticism and is a really good football player. So we'll kind of keep an eye on that and just kind of see how that develops and what that offense turns into, I think. And then I think the last bit of news for week 1, and we've done a fair bit of writing and tweeting about this since the last round of games, but Jared Kerr, we knew coming into the season that he was a bit of a special player because he racked up all the awards last year with only 7 games played. I think he averaged 200 yards a game and 3 touchdowns or more because, again, only played 7 games, 1,300 yards, 19 touchdowns. But after a good week 1 win over West, I think 25-14, and gained a bunch of yards, scored a touchdown, all the offers started rolling in for him over the weekend. Texas, OU, A&M, Florida, Notre Dame. So or not all of them, but a lot of the Power 5 programs coming knocking. And usually when you see this amount of offers, they just keep coming throughout the season. So I wouldn't be surprised to see more Power 5, more SEC schools get in on Jared Kerr and try to lure him to their schools. So, I mean, I kind of just word vomited all of that. Is there anything that you guys, have to say on that?
I just, last year I didn't cover obviously the beginning of the season. But is this kind of normal to get this many? I mean, just after week 1, having all these offers come flooding in like this.
It could be a deal of like this guy's been on schools' radars and it's a guy that they've got their eye keenly on and they finally got some fall game tape. Unfortunately, a lot of that junior class, they really missed out on not having that spring evaluation period. And coaches suffered from that too, because, I mean, they're trying to fill their recruiting boards. And for a guy like Jared Kerr, where you're like, hey, like, this guy was a sophomore. He made some good plays. He's got good measurables. We know he's going to get better. Let's see what happens. And then you don't get to spend that 4, 5, 6 week period in the spring going to different schools and checking out your potential prospects to then finally get some game tape. I think it finally showed the credibility of, okay, this is what Jared Kerr is capable of. So let's give him an offer. He's earned it. And so good for him. And like Jeff said, I wouldn't be surprised if he keeps getting more. He's a budding star in the Brazos Valley. And so he's one to keep an eye on moving forward for sure.
And you saw it last year with Cameron Valdez. Once those offers started coming in, they just kept coming. And they're still coming. It's slowed down because, there's only 119 schools at the division or at the FBS level. But, they occasionally still come in. And then what I'm wondering is what that does for some of the other players at Lexington, because I think Cameron Valdez's recruitment has helped Keyshawn Raven. Because we know the stuff that he can do. He's a really good player as well. And as you get more Division I coaches coming into your school to see one player, they'll see other players. They'll see Keyshawn Raven, and I think that kind of window opening for Keyshawn Raven helped him, get some of the. I think he's been offered by Arkansas. I don't know if there's any other SEC schools, but you saw his offer list kind of creep up after Cameron Valdez has exploded. So I'm wondering if there's any other hidden gems in Lexington that might benefit from that too. But I think that's pretty much all we got from week 1. Quickly, we'll go into week 2, talk about the games that we'll be covering, or in Alex's case, he'll be kind of our command center person doing all the bells and whistles and keeping everybody in the Brazos Valley informed. Where are you going to be this weekend, Abigail?
It will be at Madisonville and Liberty. They're going to play this week.
That was kind of one of the surprise games that, for me anyway, Alex was the only one on our panel that picked Madisonville. What was behind that pick? What did you see in the Mustangs that proved true?
You know, I was looking at the rankings, and I just felt like it was a toss up, and I felt like Madisonville had a chance. You know, the game, it was moved and then it was moved back, and so you know it ended up being a die ball. But you know, when games get moved around, you never know what's going to happen. And Madisonville showed up. They beat a pretty good die ball team, and so credit to them. That's a big win to start their season. So that was kind of my dark horse pick last week.
Well, it proved to be good for you because now you got a 1-game lead on the rest of us. But
Paid off. It paid off.
yeah, so now Madisonville's the big favorite. I think something like 30 something maybe over Liberty. You know, what are you looking for in that game, Abigail?
Yeah, well, like you said, I mean, they're coming off that win against Diboll. I think what really helped him there was Armando Juarez. He only played quarterback. He didn't go on defense. He didn't play, every snap like that. So, I was talking to Coach Urbanink. His legs were fresh and he was ready to go. And he ran for 4 touchdowns. That really helped, Brazel and Jeremiah Burns, who's a freshman, really came out too with a big game and were able to kind of help their defense, and they scored often on defense as well. Burns had a return touchdown for them as well. So it'll be interesting to see them kind of go into this game. I think they're very excited. I think they're pumped up after that win. I mean, how could you not be? They'll be at home, so they'll have that. But, Liberty and Madisonville, I believe, had very similar seasons last year, if you're just kind of looking at the records and stuff like that. Jertavius Brown told me that he reminds his team, almost all the time what their record was last year, and that they can't afford to go back there. So he said that that's always something that he tells them before games. He tells them before practice, if they do something bad or maybe something messed up. He always reminds them. So they always have that in the back of their head, I know for sure. But their front five, their offensive line, last week was our first varsity game, which is pretty impressive. I mean, to have that many rushing touchdowns and to have an offensive line that was in their first varsity game, first game in Madisonville to play. So I think it'll be really exciting. I think Madisonville's going to take this one at home. But what do y'all think, just kind of looking at this matchup?
Well, Juarez, again, kind of like Asa Party, started last year at quarterback, so he's got some experience coming in. Had, flashes of success last year. I think they were happy with how he played last year. But if he plays like he did in that game all season long, they're going to have a really good season. Looked like he was efficient passing the ball, I think 4 or 5 with an interception.
Yeah.
And, obviously did really well with his legs. I think near 150 yards on 23 carries. So I know last year a lot of their offense ran through Tyrese Brown, and I don't think he's there anymore. I think he graduated. So, maybe it's also kind of similar to Norman G, a shift in focus on where the offense is going to run through. But, yeah, certainly he had a great debut, and if their defense plays like that and they have freshman safeties playing that well all season long, and yeah, I think Madisonville will be in pretty good shape and primed to make a run to the playoffs.
Yeah, this is Liberty's first game of the season. Their game against Huffman Hargrave got canceled last week, so maybe they're a little rusty. Have those first game jitters. Madisonville, they got a game under their belt. They got a big win. That's big momentum boost, confidence booster. So I see Madisonville coming on top again this week.
And then I will be at I think Thorndale is playing Snook in Snook's first game in their new home.
Yeah.
I don't think they've ever had a football stadium, maybe back in the 50s, but yeah, they've never had a football stadium. So this is a huge deal to this program. Talked to Coach Boone Patterson several times over the summer, and obviously that came up pretty much every time we talked. And in preseason practices, it was encouraging to see that field and be able to, I think they practiced on it, to be able to practice on it. And so I think there's going to be a bit of an emotional boost there, and playing with maybe even some more pride than usual. They're going to need all of that because Thorndale is no joke. Thorndale, I think they moved into the top 10 this week by Dave Campbell's. I think they're 2A Division 1 versus Snook's 2A Division 2. So I think ultimately Thorndale will probably take the win in this. But there is a lot of cause of optimism, in my opinion, for Snook. They could have laid down last week when they went down by 2 scores to Caldwell, another team that is bigger than them, both player-wise and just the amount of people on their team. So they didn't. They came all the way back and nearly tied it, just kind of like Franklin didn't get that 2-point conversion they needed at the end. So this Blue Jays team showed fight in week 1, and again another team with an experienced quarterback in Garrett Lero. So I think it'll be close, and I think this game will be a net positive for Snook. So even though they might come out of this game 0-2. That's still, in my opinion, a really good 0-2 if they play well against Thorndale, because that's 2 opponents above their weight class that have talented and big players on their team that they'll have played well against. And I think in high school, non-district, that really doesn't matter that much. You can, like with College Station in their title year, they started 1-2, lost to some really good teams, and then went on a run, played really well. And I think that those games against those 2 really tough teams probably helped them for the rest of the season. So I think that's what you're looking at in Thorndale versus Snook.
Yeah, I think no matter the outcome, like you said, it'll be good for Snook either way, but they're really going to want to have that win the first night in that new stadium. I mean, that's going to be really pushing them, I feel like, the whole game. And they lost last week, so they're also trying to, just get a win under their belt. They have a new stadium that they've never had in the community before. I'm sure everybody's going to come out for that. So that'll be really pushing on them too. They'll have to get rid of the penalties. I know that was hard for them against Caldwell. And Coach Patterson said that, they had to clean up that execution a little bit. So they weren't necessarily bad penalties. It was mostly holding and stuff like that. But they'll probably have to kind of get past that this week too. But it'll be interesting. They're going to really want that win in that stadium. So
absolutely. So now we're to the point where we usually normally we're talking about Bryan, College Station, Consol, Rudder. But as those teams that have yet to start the season, they're on that staggered start. Usually we do the area games at the end. Now it's all area. So of the games that we're not covering personally this weekend, what games are you looking at the area? Big games or things you're looking at that interest you? Alex, you can probably take it first.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, a game that I'm looking at is Centerville at Corrigan Camden. When it got to cover Centerville a couple times last year, and Centerville lost its opener pretty bad last week to New Waverly, 34-12. And sounds like the Tigers played pretty sloppy too. They had 3 turnovers. They only had 217 total yards of offense. They scored on the first play, and then it was a whole lot of nothing after that. This is a big road game. They're playing a team that's the classification ahead of them, Corrigan Camden. Corrigan Camden beat them last year. So can Centerville rebound? The Harris ratings have them favored by 6, and a win this Friday would be big, just to get the morale back and get the season going in the right direction. Dylan Denman's a playmaker. We know that. He's very talented. So I'm curious to see what Centerville can do and if they can get a big win on the road this weekend.
Yeah, I haven't talked to Coach Hardy this week, but with how Centerville loves to play defense and run the ball, I can't imagine that team is very happy with how week 1 went. I was surprised when I saw that final score. I was really surprised when I saw that final score. So, I would think that this week you will see a team that that gets back to those roots, plays stingier defense. I mean, I know they got some big guys on that defensive line, so I wouldn't be surprised if they imposed their will in week 2 because, led by, I think, Paxton Hancock, that defensive front seven has been really good over the last, since I've been here. So that's what I'm looking at in that game. Abigail, I can't remember the game you said. What's interesting you in across the area in week 2?
Well, some 6-man action happening this week. So BV Chia versus Victoria, homeschooled. This should be a good one. I covered the state title game last year. Victoria won. And then they also played, I believe, at the beginning of that season, and Victoria won that one as well. So BV Chia, I saw both matchups last year, both coming down to the second half. They play well. They score in the first half, BV Chia, but that they can't keep it up down the stretch, and that really hurts them in the end because Victoria can just come in and just, pound it in a little bit. And they won the state title game 46-24 last year. Victoria coming in probably very confident. BV Chia probably trying to prove themselves a little bit here. They lost 4 seniors, including Cody Davis, who was a big player for them. They do return Owen Davis, who's a wide receiver and a kicker for them as well. So they do have some of those people back that are probably ready to be Victoria here. But that's really what I'm looking forward to this week. I think it'll be a good one.
Yeah, 6-man, anything can happen in football, but I feel like 6-man is like, take that and you like kind of push that up to the next level because it's just so wide open. It's so different and more quickly paced than 11-man football is. And so I think it just lends itself to more randomness. A few things can go wrong and completely change the complexion of a game even more than 11-man. Earlier last season, BV Chia actually blew out Victoria like one of the first few weeks of the season. I think it was like 45-6 or something like that. And so, going through last year, picking those games, I was like, oh, BV Chia is going to win that probably. It didn't really pay much mind to it. And I should have known, 6-man is its own thing. Like it's a fun time and it's really, really fast paced and really different. So, I think that'll be a good game to watch because it could go any number of ways.
Either way, yeah.
So I think for me, the game I'm looking at is Belleville at Cameron, both coming off big wins over good teams in week 1. Cameron edging Mexia by a score, and Belleville, I think they beat Giddings by 3 points. Giddings and Mexia both really good programs, consistently in the playoffs. So now we got 2 more good teams, Cameron and Belleville, going at each other. And I think Cameron, this is going to be one of those seasons where it's like rebuild and reload at the same time, because you had a lot of really good players leave off that team. James DeBose, Nico Vargas, that receiver that I just can't think of right now that I'm like kicking myself over. But lots of good players off of that team. And, now you're trying to, and obviously quarterback Braden Brashear as well. So you're trying to replace a lot of people, and you still have a lot of talent that's just inexperienced. So I think you're looking for Zane Zeinert at quarterback to continue to progress. He had a pretty solid game last week. And I think that they're really trying to figure out who is going to be the runners that are going to take over for Vargas and DeBose. Lots of guys handled the ball last week in the run game. So you're just kind of looking at that. And we are running out of time, so I'm going to go ahead and call it because it's going to cut off any minute here on Zoom. But thanks again for joining me, you guys, this week, and looking forward to week 2 and week 3. And before you know it, the 5A and 6A schools will be here, and we'll be in district play for the smaller schools.
There you go.
All right, that's week 2 of the Eagles High School Sports Podcast. Thanks for listening.